Mr. Speaker, the message I'm sending to my colleagues today is therefore simple. Let's put partisan interests aside and protect Gatineau Park together. Thank you.
Gatineau Park still has no protection that would guarantee the preservation of its natural and historic heritage. In reality, it is the only major federal park from which lands can be removed without a review or approval from Parliament. And yet a natural environment like Gatineau Park is precious and fragile. It is high time that that changed, Mr. Speaker.
My bill provides for the implementation of very simple measures. First of all, to enshrine the boundaries of the park in law. Currently, the park's boundaries can be modified and only by decree, not without parliamentarians having anything to say about it. My goal was to give the park legal protection that's similar to that of our national parks, and therefore to oblige the government to pass legislation every time they want to change those boundaries. The boundaries will be made permanent in legislation, and that would ensure that Gatineau Park would represent 7.8% of the region of the national capital area. Secondly, my bill would allow the park to have official status by creating legally the Gatineau Park, a National Capital Conservation Park. And I'm certain that all members here would be very proud to recognize this park. Thirdly, the measures provide for the addition or the giving to the NCC of two new missions, that is to say, to protect Gatineau Park's natural biodiversity, its underlying ecological structure and environmental processes, and to promote education and leisure activities in the park, and to acquire the real property situated in Gatineau Park. At the same time, my bill would make it mandatory to respect the 6 management objectives for Gatineau Park that correspond to what the International Union for the Conservation of Nature Category 2 protected areas would give, that is to say national parks. So the first objective would be to manage the area in order to preserve in a natural state, as natural a state as possible, representative examples of physiographic regions, biotic communities, genetic resources, and natural processes. Secondly, to maintain viable and ecologically functional populations and assemblages of native species at densities sufficient to preserve the long-term integrity and resilience of the ecosystem. Third objective, to contribute in particular to the conservation of wide-ranging species, regional ecological processes, and migration routes. Fourth, manage visits, be they for spiritual, educational, cultural, or recreational purposes, so that they cause no significant biological or ecological degradation of the natural resources. Fifth, to take into account the needs of the Aboriginal populations and local communities, including the use of subsistence resources, insofar as they do not negatively affect the mission of the Commission as it relates to the park. And the final one, to contribute to the local economy through tourism. And now, if we come back to these measures, the fourth, which provides not to allow for any degradation of the park, and the NCC would not need the permission of the Governor and Council to make changes to the park. So it would make it easier to speed up the process and to allow the NCC to become a purchaser of private property as it becomes available in the park. And finally, my bill would amend the Department of Canadian Heritage Act in order that it be clarified that Gatineau Park is included in the organization, the sponsorship, and the promotion of the capital region of public activities and events that will enrich the cultural and social fabric of Canada. These simple measures would allow for the protection of the integrity of the park, but also ensure the quality of its recreational experience. Today, I'm very pleased to confirm that my initiative has received the support of organizations at the forefront of environmental protection, as well as the signature of many constituents. They have the support of Nature Québec, the Regional Council for the Environmental and Sustainable Development of the Outaouais, and the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society regional area. So 76 years after its creation, Gatineau Park still has neither legal protection nor official status. As elected members here, we have the responsibility to remedy this situation by giving the park the necessary legal protections for its preservation for current and future generations. Mr. Speaker, the message I'm sending to my colleagues today is therefore simple. Let's put partisan interests aside and protect Gatineau Park together. Thank you.
This government understands and shares Canadian interest in Gatineau Park and continues to support the NCC's efforts and to itself play a leadership role in taking meaningful action to protect and conserve the park. Our government's position is that Bill C-565 does not offer a particular effective approach to protecting Gatineau Park and is far too restricted in its scope. Need I remind the opposition whip that we here in the capital region live and work in close proximity to many other more green spaces than Gatineau Park alone. We are also surrounded by the green belt and multiple urban green spaces which fall under the federal authority and the NCC's stewardship. Bill C-565 unfortunately only introduces measures to protect one of these parks, Gatineau Park, coincidentally the park closest to the opposition whip's riding. Our government feels that this approach in Bill C-565 is far too narrow and has always taken a strong position, as evidenced by the previous government bills mentioned earlier, that any reopening of the National Capital Act must ensure the enhanced protection of all green spaces in the capital region, including Gatineau Park and the Green Belt. Bill C-565, the restricted scope, also means that it only focuses on one dimension of the National Capital Act concerning Gatineau Park, and in so doing neglects to address some of the other aspects of the Act which could use updating. While the government strongly believes that the National Capital Commission remains the federal body best placed to ensure the promotion, protection, and conservation of green spaces in the capital region, including Gatineau Park, we also need to provide this Crown Corporation with a modernized governance structure and updated authorities, in addition to strengthened protective measures for the park, the green belt, and other properties held by the Commission, in order to enable the Commission to continue successfully implementing its mandate. In MBA side, there are also insurmountable substantive problems with Bill C-565. I will only address one here. It's a problematic imposition of an obligation on the NCC to buy all real estate property in the Gatineau Park. We are talking about 377 properties that are privately owned in the park, with a roughly estimated current value of $100 million. Adopting this amendment in Bill C in 565 would clearly cause the market prices of properties in the park to inflate, while concurrently legally obligating the Commission to purchase these same properties regardless of the price. This is far from a responsible way to spend taxpayers' money.
For the reasons I will evoke this afternoon, Gatineau Park requires better legal protection. That's why the Liberal opposition will support a second reading Bill C-565. Gatineau Park is the only federal park that does not benefit from protection from Parliament. Contrary to national parks, its borders can be changed, its territory can be sold, roads can be built in it, without Parliament being seized of such matters. Gatineau Park is administered by the National Capital Commission, which does not prohibit commercial or industrial activities in the park or the use of the territory for development requirements. Without adequate legal protection, the territory of Gatineau Park has experienced heavy losses. In rationalizing the borders in the 90s, the National Capital Commission removed 1,508 acres from the park. Given that 334 acres were dedicated to road construction in the same period, roads that were built in violation of commitments made in the framework of the guidelines, the number of acres removed from the park total 1,842, that is 5 square kilometers. In addition to the absence of adequate property management mechanisms, the NCC has allowed considerable urbanization within the park. 125 residences have been built in it since 1992.
Commitments to acquire private property, some 296 private properties consisting of 2,112 acres remain within Gatineau Park. Moreover, several large private properties remain inside the park, which risk being turned into major subdivisions, impeding the park's evolution as a conservation site intended for public enjoyment.
Gatineau Park should be afforded the same kind of legal protection and parliamentary overview as national parks throughout Canada. By amending the National Capital Act, it should acquire the legal status, the borders, and the property management mechanism necessary to guarantee transparency of its administration and its long-term protection. This park has to be given the protection framework advocated by various citizens groups for decades and help the NCC fulfill its commitment to gradually acquiring private properties while respecting the right of property owners to continue to live in the park.
This bill establishes only a moral obligation to ecological integrity by dedicating the park to future generations. Necessary measures to ensure the protection, preservation, and management of Gatineau Park for the benefit of current and future generations are put forth with little framework and no legislative backing. Additional amendments are clearly needed to better back NCC objectives of management and long-term conservation and restoration. As it stands, this bill lacks statutory protection and adequate parliamentary oversight, and thus fails to effectively support the establishment of measures that would better protect and preserve the ecological integrity of Gatineau Park. Even more, this bill contradicts Section 14 of the National Capital Act, which stipulates that the NCC can resort to expropriation of private lands whenever it becomes necessary for the purposes of its mandate. As stated by Jean-Paul Murray, Secretary of the Gatineau Park Protection Committee, and I quote, "By stipulating that the NCC cannot infringe on private property rights, this bill is an open invitation to landowners to subdivide and develop their land as they see fit, since it will entrench their right to do so. That clause works against another section of her bill mandating the NCC to acquire private park land. Acquiring private land and encouraging its development are contradictory objectives." Close quote. It's clear that additional amendments are needed to better back NCC objectives of long-term ecological integrity while still respecting the rights of landowners. At this point, before further consultations and discussion, at least 2 amendments are needed. First, there's a need for a right of first refusal. Clear regulations would obligate a property owner to give the NCC the first chance to purchase the property should the owner decide to sell, subsequent to which parkland may be bought and sold on the open market. By no means does the right of first refusal limit property rights of landowners. Only owners themselves have the power to bring about the circumstances which would vest any right in the NCC to buy their property. Rights of landowners must and should continue to be respected. Cet amendement
This amendment simply requires that landowners give the NCC right of first refusal. It does not limit property rights in any way. It would allow landowners of lots within Gatineau Park to continue to live there and to pass on their properties to their children through estates or trusts.
provide a protective legislation for Gatineau Park via an amendment to the National Capital Act. Such a legislative framework by Parliament would support the NCC's role as park manager and would give the park the same kind of statutory protection and adequate parliamentary oversight given to national parks throughout our beautiful country.